Producers, listen up. Do you sometimes feel like producing is a little bit too hard? Things get a little too complicated and you kind of feel like quitting? Well, today I'm going to be reacting to a video by Navie D, giving you tips on how to simplify the production process and make things much more efficient and smoother in the learning process. So that way you get my perspective as well, so you walk away with double the value. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
Today, I'm using my experience to answer your questions and give advice so you can become a better producer. So starting with question number 1 from Citic Vicious. I like the way my beats sound, but I know I'm not using EQ in a standard way. Can you help me understand it? So this is something that I struggled with as well until I realized my mistake. Let me explain it like this. Let's say you were a surgeon and you wanted to become better at using a knife for surgery. So you went onto YouTube and you searched for tutorials on how to use a knife. But here's the thing, all the videos you find are made by chefs. But you still decide to watch these videos with chefs chopping up onions and stabbing up all kinds of meats, and you think to yourself, great, I'll use this for my next surgery. What will happen next? The police will probably lock you up, you sicko. And the same exact thing applies to producing too. When it comes to using these standard tools, most of the popular tutorials on these are made by music engineers. Now what you need to understand is that music engineers use these tools in a completely different way than producers should. And here's why. A music engineer's goal is to take the music that's given to them and make it sound optimal. So they'll use these standard tools to make subtle changes. But if you're a producer, your goal is completely different. So using a standard tool in a less standard way is actually encouraged. In fact, this is exactly what can result in unique textures and sounds and ideas for your beats. So if you're not using these standard tools in the standard way, that's completely fine because you don't have the same goal that a mixing engineer does. Your standard is to be creative, so feel free to use these tools in a different way as long as the music comes out to your liking.
Okay, that was an interesting response, but let me go ahead and give my perspective on it because I find myself wearing both hats at times. So when I started, I did find myself watching shows like Pensado's Place and different message boards that was, like you mentioned, primarily geared towards music engineers. So I did find myself being a little bit lost in the process, especially with EQ more specifically. I was making changes for the sake of making changes, not really understanding what I'm doing. So from a producer's perspective, we tend to make broader decisions when it comes to EQing different sounds. But I will still say this, even as a producer, more so speaking of a beat maker, you want to understand the tool at least from a fundamental level. So if this person is asking the question, I'm using it in an EQ, but I'm not using it in a standard way, the first thing I would tell this producer is to try your best to understand the different frequency ranges, the sub, the low mids, the high mids, the higher frequencies, and understand why you're making the changes that you're making. If you're gonna make EQ changes, even if it's in the context of making a beat, still play the rest of the instrumentation while you're making the changes. So for instance, let's say I have a string in a beat and the beat is kind of a boom bap beat. If I have a string in a beat and I also have a sample going and I'm just EQing my string by itself without the sample there, I can make the string sound really good. And then when I put it in context with the rest of the beat, after I do that, the string may not sound so good because it's interacting with the other frequencies in the beat. So I still need to understand that making changes out of context are going to sound different than making changes in context with the rest of the sounds. So that's going to take some practice to actually understand. Looking at different tutorials is good. I would also recommend, if you can, try to take some time to even do an hour, 2 hours with a local recording engineer just to pick their brain and understand what's going on underneath the hood. And they can help you break bad habits that you're doing. It's better to understand the why underneath the process so then you can break the rules intentionally as opposed to just tripping and possibly making happy accidents. But in the making happy accidents, you can also find yourself making changes and then fixing it later on in the chain in the mixer of your DAW that you really didn't need to do. So you can start to overthink things. And also, if you need help, make sure you check out the link in the description again for 7 steps to a better sounding beat mix. I break down very simple, very easy to use tips and tricks on mixing your beats, so that way you're just much more informed on how to get to the end goal that you're trying to get to. But let's go ahead and get back to the rest of the video.
Question from Max Webb. Sounds like a name Spider-Man would come up with to keep his identity secret. I'm suspicious. Recently, I have been going through troubles turning my loops into full songs. I feel like I can create a 4-bar loop that I like, but oftentimes I struggle to make a full song that doesn't sound repetitive. So when it comes to arranging, the mistake I see producers make is treating the symptom rather than treating the cause. When producers don't like their arrangements, they'll try to learn arrangement tips and tricks, thinking this will solve their problem. But none of this is actually addressing the real problem. So what is the real problem? It's probably sound addition. Think of it like this. A good arrangement is created by controlling the energy of the track, by creating highs and lows. And the best way to do this is by adding or removing sounds from your beat. So if I asked you how you choose sounds for your beat and your best answer is that you just go by whatever sounds cool, this is part of the problem. You need to know what will actually work with your beat and how to add sounds in a balanced way. Knowing how to do this will unlock so many more arrangement ideas than any arrangement hack ever could. And if this is a skill you struggle with, this is likely the cause of your problem.
Arranging your beats. Yes, it's super simple to get stuck in that 4-bar or 8-bar loop prison that you just kind of feel like you can't get out of. So I've definitely been there in the past, and I definitely feel your pain. From my personal experience, one way that I got past that, I did learn different tips and tricks, especially as far as doing low pass filtering, removing sounds, adding sounds, understanding how to break up the beat that way. One story I tell frequently in my videos is having an actual recording artist next to me, and this recording artist, after I was done with or in the process of still making the beat, he said, all right, go ahead and arrange it so I can hurry up and start recording. I felt that pressure. I knew I had to arrange it. I couldn't just save it and get back to it later. And that pressure made me learn how to quickly get from that 4 or 8-bar loop and just stretch it out to make it a full song. So, don't be afraid to challenge yourself. Force yourself to finish the beat. It may not sound so good at first, but if you consistently do it, you never know what could happen. On top of that, it's still cool to check out different tips and tricks on YouTube. That's cool to have in your mental Rolodex as far as creating tension, using filters, just little itty-bitty tweaks, using silence, all these different tweaks that you can use to help break a beat apart. It's always good to have in your mental Rolodex, but there's nothing that's really going to help you as much as experience, honestly. Just continuously making beats, consistently making beats, collabing with other producers. That's another great way to actually see firsthand how other producers are breaking things down from those little loop sections and stretching them out to full tracks. And even if you do get stuck at times, having another producer that you can send your beat over to, and you two are, let's just say, relatively on the same level, you can use each other's skill sets to help you finish each other's beats. And in the process, you two are getting stronger and stronger, and you're knowing and listening to all the little spaces and areas that you didn't know how to actually use to complete the beat. You can even listen to how they're selecting sounds. Then in the future, you can use that in your arsenal too. So always work on beats. It's cool to check out tips and tricks and also collab with other producers. And if you can, in person, work with recording artists so they can push you to learn how to get out of that 4 or 8-bar loop prison.
Question from Cool Something. Is there a more efficient way of finding effects or ear candy rather than just downloading random packs and praying? There's a lot of different ways to go about doing this, but I'll just give you a quick and easy technique that I use from time to time. Take your loop or sample and route it to a separate insert. Then on the second version of your layer, pitch this up or down an octave. This way it doesn't sit in the same space as your first layer. Then add creative effect plugins and use automation to control when you want this layer to appear. This is an easy way to introduce a creative layer of effects or ear candy that not only sounds unique, but will work perfectly with your sample or loop since it was built using it.
Now, my thoughts on sweep and effects are relatively simple. I just have a folder with my favorite sweeps and effects just saved right there in my favorite section in FL Studio. And when I feel like using them, I just drag them and drop them in. As producers, sometimes we do want to have some of those elements that sound familiar to the ear. So if you're a person who's a prolific beat maker and you make a lot of beats, it is kind of cool to hear that same sweep every now and then, or that same crash, or that same drum feel. It's cool to hear it consistently. We have producers back in the day like, Just Blaze, and he had that high riser sweep, and Drummer Boy had a similar high riser sweep. Kanye used to have this real signature clap sound that he used to use. So, we don't always have to have everything just this big wide variety. It is cool to have your own fingerprint, thumbprint as a producer. And in my personal opinion, I like those sweeps are, pretty safe. It's not going to become redundant to use the same sweep in different beats. So don't be afraid to be a little bit repetitive with those sweeps. I promise it's only really other producers and artists who are big fans of you, and that could be a unique way to kind of have your own signature or stamp on your beats.
Next question is from Derek Duverger. Here are the areas that have been giving me problems regarding music production. So he's coming in with multiple problems here. Let's see what we can do. Problem number 1, limited space. Currently living with my girlfriend and her 2 dogs in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Not really sure how I can help you there. Maybe force your dogs to get their own apartment. I don't know. Problem number 2, no desk. I would recommend buying a desk. That is a solution.
All right, limited space and no desk. Let's just go ahead and tackle those 2 right now. Man, there was a period of time where I made beats on a laptop and an interface, and I was not in a position to have a desk or anything like that. This music production and engineering journey, I've seen highs in my life and I've seen lows in my life. So I know what it's like to not have a nice setup and be, in between in life. So, I definitely empathize with you, Derek, because we don't always have it together in life. And that's just a part of being human. That's just the journey of life. But in the process, I did make beats from a dining room table with just my cheap, very borderline broken laptop and an M audio interface and these headphones. And I just did the best that I could. And honestly, I made some really fire beats. When you have limited tools and limited resources, it just forces you to get very creative, man. I've made some very fire beats not having a nice setup. So if it's really in you and you're really passionate about it, you'll find a way, man. If you have to make beats on your lap, if you have to make beats on top of a dresser, I've been there, man. So if you have the passion, if you do want to do it, work with what you have till you can get to the point where you can afford what you want. So that's just a part of the evolution of life. So I feel you, keep grinding, but don't stop making music just because you're not in an optimal position right now.
Problem number 3, figuring out which DAW to use in this stage of my life. I started with Reason and stayed with it for many years until I tried Logic and Ableton a few years ago. This is a common problem in the music production space, in my opinion. If you look up which DAW is the best, you will find an endless amount of debates and conversations where people will call each other dumbbells and how real pros use this DAW over the other one. I did a video a while back on Ninth Wonder, a legendary producer who was mocked by the internet for using FL way back in the 2000s. Even after making incredible beats that even landed on a Jay-Z album, Ninth Wonder actually liked and recommended this video, by the way. But the idea behind that video is that actual producers don't care about what you use because it doesn't matter. You wouldn't ask your favorite author what pen he uses thinking that that's the key to writing a great book. My advice is to just choose one DAW and learn it until it becomes easy to use. From there, focus on actual beat making, because jumping from DAW to DAW isn't the game changer that you think it is.
Yes, the infamous DAW journey. We've all been there. Man, I've been on FL Studio, Reason, Logic, Machine, Pro Tools to record, and I'm back on FL Studio for the beats. And that's not to mention the different hardware that I've used in my lifetime. So it's definitely been a journey for me. I've seen a little bit of everything. I would say you need to figure out what works for you. what works for your workflow? What just naturally works with how you think when it comes to creating music? Like you mentioned, I do remember when Ninth Wonder was being mocked for using FL Studio and not quote unquote real producer equipment. You know, he got it bad, man. I'm telling you, people were going in on him. But his music was always fire, and it always sounded warm and had that nice, to me, had that kind of analog sound to it, just because he knew what he was doing with his tools. So if you find a DAW that you enjoy making beats in and it's not popular amongst other people, don't be afraid to still use it. I even remember when like Hit Boy was using FL Studio and Chasing Cash and all these other producers, people still was like, yeah, y'all need real equipment, and they made fire, and they still very much forces in the music game. So try different DAWs out. Once you do, like he said, actually read the manual. Tutorials are good, tutorials help, but there's a lot of features underneath the hood that you're gonna learn by actually looking at the manual and trying things out yourself. So that's something I definitely wish I did much earlier. Maybe I wouldn't have jumped around so much to different DAWs. But yeah, check out the tutorial. Once you find a DAW that you like and you like the workflow, explore from there.
Next question is from Grout, who, by the way, has been supporting this channel since way back. This question is, how do you come up with your own style of beat? After watching tons of interviews of my favorite producers and reflecting back on my own experience, I believe the path to creating your own style is similar for a lot of producers. First, you start making beats because you're probably inspired by one producer. So you learn everything there is to imitate that style. Let's say that this color here represents that one producer's style. But after a while, you'll probably feel like you want to learn more. Maybe there are one or two other producers who you want to learn from as well. So we add a few more colors to this. And this is when you start to form your own original style. It's this intersection here of your influences and the different ideas and techniques you learn from them. This ends up being your own new and original style. Yes, there is nothing new under the sun, but combining multiple unique inspirations and techniques that no one else has, it can help you naturally develop a style that is at least different than everyone else. This is also why I say that there's nothing more boring than a beat made by someone who only listens to beats, because their influences will be so common that their style probably won't be all that unique. But there's another part to the equation here, which is to have the courage to even create this. I know for me, sometimes when I make a weird beat for a video, there's a part of me that gets worried or even slightly afraid, because I know people will leave comments like this. But I also know that if I let this become a voice in my own head, I'll eventually become too afraid to try anything. So it's important to have courage, and courage only comes after you do the thing that you're afraid of, not before. So put those weird beats out there, my friend.
That's a great question, and also a great response by Navie D. I kind of took the question a bit differently. To me, it sounded like they were asking, how do I develop my own personal style as a producer? And also, how do I create my style that's so unique that it becomes my own quote unquote type beat sub niche or subgenre? So the advice given is definitely right and exact. Me, I started emulating producers like Kanye, like some of the bad boy era R&B style producers. And then as I went, I continued to get more and more influences. And just over time, just my own personal style just started to develop just by working on beats, admiring different producers. And also another thing is the artists that I work with started choosing different styles of beats. So I would notice R&B artists liked beats that I didn't use too many different chords in. I maybe use like 3-4 chords, really simple chord structure. That's what I noticed for my R&B beats. And for my hip hop beats, I noticed that artists like dirtier but soulful beats. So there's a grit to it, yet it's soulful. And then I know to kind of double down and replicate those style of beats a bit more. So definitely don't be afraid to try different things, try different styles of beats. You know, of course we have our influences, but also work with recording artists, because we're making music mostly for recording artists. And as you get those beats out there, and as you see a pattern of what they like, especially when you're working with artists who aren't demanding that you make that person's style of beat, who they just rock with you because you have a style of music that they like, you will know to double down because the artists are informing you on what they like, and you could just refine that style a bit more. Now for the other part of the question, at least how I'm interpreting it, how do I make a style that that's so unique that it becomes my own quote unquote type beat, like ATL Jacob type beat or Pierre Bourne type beat. That's not really something to think about. As a producer, you're creating music. Again, you're getting your influences, you're creating your own style. Old Town Road by Young Keo and Lil Nas X, that was labeled a Future type beat. To me, that doesn't sound anything like a Future type beat. So if you're worried about SEO on making your YouTube type beat channel and you're just confused on what to do and you're trying to be super unique and out the box, to me, that tells me a person is thinking with their ego. You feel like you want to make something that's so niched and so unique that other people really won't know how to label that. And that's a mistake I see a lot of producers doing, especially when you're kind of getting out of your new producer phase and you're getting into like your intermediate producer phase. Producers want to feel like they're special. But at the end of the day, the type beat label is just a way for artists to find a type of lane for a style of music that they want to make. It's not that your beat sounds exactly like Metro and Future or it's Turbo and Gunna replica. There are producers who do that replica style, but at the end of the day, artists are in the recording studio and they're just flipping through different beats. They're inspired. I want something that's like a Gunna vibe. Then they're just gonna get on YouTube and search. So don't worry about being so unique that you can't be found. As you're posting your YouTube type beats, just think to yourself, what rapper could I hear on this beat? If I had to force myself to think of one, what rapper could I hear on this? And even if you need to do a Google search just to remind yourself who would fit this lane, who would fit this style of beat, just pick one, try to get as close as possible, post, and go from there. So don't spend too much time thinking about it, because I know firsthand, working with different recording artists in the studio, I've pulled up different beats and Pro Tools for us to record to, and I'm like, this doesn't sound anything like a Future beat, or this doesn't sound anything like a Gunna beat, but it's just a fire beat, and the label on it says Gunna or Lil Baby type beat, but that was just a way for them to be found. So don't think too much, just make the beat and post it.
Next question, this is from Spectrum. I see a lot of producers are able to make beats within an hour. Are you able to do this? What tips can you give to make quality beats faster? So I am at the point where I can make a beat within an hour, and my belief is that the way to get here is through problem solving. Let me explain what I mean by this. Right now, you probably struggle because there are tons of problems that you have when you're trying to make a beat that you have no solutions for. You have a unique loop going, but now it comes time to make a drum pattern around it and you have no idea what to do. Or you need to make a bass line that makes your beat sound full, but you have no idea what will work. Now, when I first started making beats, it would take me hours just to come up with one solution for just one of these problems. And sometimes my solutions failed, but sometimes they worked. And when they did work, what started to happen was that I used this solution again and again for other similar situations. And this became my go-to. And as a side note, to go back to the point that we talked about earlier, this is basically what a style actually is when you think about it. You can think of a producer's style as simply the way they solve the common beat making problems in their own unique way. And as you continue to solve more and more of these common problems, you will build this index of solutions that your brain can quickly reach for. And this is basically how you finish beats faster. So that's the unfortunate answer to your question. You have to continue to suffer through these problems until your brain builds your own set of solutions. Or you can learn them directly from others, which is why my channel exists.
Great question. And that was also a great response. I never really would have framed it in the sense of problem solving, but that's just an interesting way to look at that question. I would kind of essentially saying the same thing, just that what I was thinking as soon as I heard the question was experience. You just need more experience. You need to put more reps in. It's like shooting a basketball. How do I shoot a basketball and make 7 out of 10? You do it by doing it. You have to keep consistently shooting. And to Navie D's point, you'll learn different ways of setting up your shot. Maybe you need to, move your knees a little bit. Maybe you need to flick your wrist a little bit more, but you'll really never know how to do that unless you actually take the shot. So don't get frustrated. Don't feel like giving up. Don't spend too much time just in the thinking mode. One good thing about the era that I started making beats in is almost that we didn't have too many resources. You just kind of had to figure it out. So we didn't have so many different videos kind of leading us all kinds of different ways. We had to listen. Maybe there was another producer who posted online. We just had to listen. Maybe we liked the way the drums sound. We had to hunt for drums. Drums weren't just everywhere in this nice little area called Reddit. You had to find them and share it with people that you knew. It's still just gonna boil down to experience. A couple of tips I can give that actually helped me in the process of solving my problems and learning to make beats just quicker and more efficiently is learning at least a little bit of music theory, just knowing your scales, knowing some of your chords. That way it was just much easier for me to make sure things were in key and not really get frustrated that I couldn't get things to sound the way that I wanted them to sound. That's something that I would also give you as a producer to do as well. Just learn some music theory, learn at least a little bit of the keyboard that's going to help you in making beats quicker. Also understanding your DAW at least a little bit more. Once again, jumping in there, looking at the manual. There could be problems that you run into that you feel like there isn't a solution to yet, but there actually is. You're just not aware of it. So you're kind of searching around, looking for different things, maybe even buying different plugins that you actually don't need. It's right there. You just don't know that it exists. So music theory, keep practicing, and learn your DAW more.
Question from Darth Cheeto. Is it lazy to find a nice 4 or 8 bar loop and just repeat it for the entirety of a song, especially if you're just starting out? So the last part of your question is important. You mentioned that you were just starting out. And if that's the case, I actually think you're doing the right thing here. I wouldn't worry too much about arranging if you're just starting out, and here's why. If your core loop doesn't sound all that good for the 4 or 8 bars that it lasts, the chance that it will just magically sound good for a full 3-minute arrangement is just very low. So if you're just starting out, I think it's completely okay to focus on only building core loops and getting good at that, even if you don't bother arranging your beats fully. Like I mentioned before, the skills that you learn doing this, like sound addition, will help you make better arrangements anyways later on. So this is yet another case of building the fundamentals before you move on to the next skill.
My question for that question would be, when you say new, how new are we talking? Are we talking a couple weeks new? Are we talking a couple months new? Just how new are we talking about? Because structuring the beat is still a part of the beat making process. Now, in my Heat Check live beat review show, one thing I've noticed from some producers who I can tell are relatively new is they do go on this journey of non-structure and not really a way that I think is intentional. Sometimes you can make a beat with no real arrangement or structure intentionally, but I have noticed there are instances where it's just not structured because the producer doesn't quite know where they're going. They just know they like the groove, they like how the melody sounds, and they're just kind of like, well, let me just try this, let me just try this, let me just try this. I would say structuring the beat, at least to me, is still a part of the beat making process. So that's something that still needs to be understood as something that needs to be developed. So, if you're just messing around, you're super brand new, then you can play around and just figure out getting things to sound good, which is a phase. I'm trying to figure out how to get certain things to sound good and sound good together. So that's a beginner phase. But as you get better and better, definitely understand that structuring the beat is a part of the beat making process. You don't want to walk around with a handicap already there, or a weakness that's going to kind of grow with you as you go on your music production journey. So check out some different videos on structuring your beats. There are definitely some helpful ones out there. It's not as challenging as you think it is. Artists don't need that much going on in the beat to actually have enough to create a song to your instrumental.
Next question is from Nandez. How the hell do I get the sounds that I want? Sound design is so hard. It seems like everyone magically has the sounds that they need. I'm so frustrated with this. So this is something that I was frustrated by as well when I first started making beats. I felt like I had all these amazing, perfect sounds in my head, that if only I could create them, my beat would suddenly become perfect. And as years went on and I got better and better at making beats, I noticed that whenever I would be able to create that perfect idea in my head, it actually wasn't all that great in my beat. I realized that the ideas that I had in my head were just ideas, same as any other. You might think that they're perfect right now because they're the only ones that you have in your head, but believing that this one sound or one idea is going to be the key to unlocking a great beat, it's a mistake in my opinion. For me now, whenever I'm adding a sound into my beat, I no longer obsess over trying to create the exact sound that I have in my head specifically. Instead, I think about the characteristics of that sound. Am I imagining a sound that has a lot of sustain to it? What are the frequencies of the sound that I'm imagining? Is the sound close or far away? Once I have these characteristics in mind, I look for the types of instruments that have those characteristics. And this gives me many more ideas that I can try and test out instead of just being married to one. So my advice here is to learn the common instruments. What are the characteristics of a piano, a Fender Rhodes, an organ, a guitar? What makes these different from one another? And once you have a framework for categorizing all these common sounds, you can match what's in your head to them. And this makes choosing the right sounds for your beats much, much easier.
Sound selection, yes, this is a question that a lot of producers have and really get frustrated with. So with sound selection, it's a matter of finding high quality sounds and also finding complementary sounds that go along with it. On top of that, you need to know what sounds you can use that just need a little bit of tweaking. For example, if you have let's just say a piano sound that's just, you put it on and it just feels like it's taking up a whole bunch of room in your mix. Instead of getting rid of that piano sound, if you understand what you're doing, you know that you could just do a little bit of scooping, a little bit of shelving on the low end, maybe a little bit of a dip in the mid-range on your EQ to open up some space. After you have that space, you can add that pad on top of that you were hearing in your head as well. So, there's the sound selection, there's finding complementary sounds, and there's understanding that using EQ can be a great way to shape and open up space and also, open up room for a complementary sound to just lay on top of. One thing I used to do when I first started making beats, when I was in my Reason phase, when I was using Reason, is I would just take time, not have beat making on my mind, and I would just go through the different sections in Reason and just start making my own patches. So that way I have this Rolodex of sounds that I enjoy using. So just because Reason had good sounds in there doesn't mean I had to be stuck with them. I can create my own patch for piano, my own patch for bass, my own patch for strings, and also that allowed me to start develop my own signature sound by having those patches that had my, my own unique taste on it, that I knew when I was making a beat, if I wanted a piano or a bell, it was my bell, it was my piano, and I could do it in a way where it didn't sound too repetitive or it sounded like I just didn't have access to a lot of different sounds. I could still tweak it a little bit just to open it up and give it a little bit of a unique tone, so don't be afraid to, of course, learn EQ, learn sound selection, and also take some time to develop your own bank of sounds. We all have these tools, these VSTs that are easily accessible. Take the time to customize them so that way you don't find yourself frustrated when it comes time to accessing and looking for high quality sounds.
Question from Music Accountant. How do you choose a specific niche when starting? Many genres feel interesting, but on the other hand, is it really going to help me grow? So this is a tricky question to answer. My thought on this, while it sounds artsy, I feel it's actually practical, and that answer is to just pursue what interests you. This is cliche advice you've already heard before. Create what you love, blah, blah, blah. It will feel great and fulfilling and satisfying, which is all true. But when you look at this from a practical view, think about it like this. If you tried to focus on a genre or style that you didn't really like just because it's popular, what are the chances that you'll actually succeed? Because you are entering into a competition with someone else who does have a genuine interest in that genre. So what are the chances you'll be able to outwork and outperform them? After you spent 3 hours working making beats, you're tired because it's not fun for you. But that other producer, they can go for another 8 hours because they're not working. They're just having fun. So you might as well do what interests you to begin with. It's the best chance you have at success anyways.
Yes, you definitely want to find that style of music production that you enjoy making, that you can get totally lost in and just even lose all sense of time and what's going on around you. That's always a great feeling. In that, you always want to develop and polish and refine that sound and continue to just grow deeper with it. And also, one thing that's going to help you out a lot is collaborating with other producers who share that style of music production with you. Not only is it going to help you finish more beats, but it's also going to keep you encouraged. It's also going to let you know that you're not the only one with this style of music who enjoys creating it. And also you can share artists, which is also validating that I'm making a style of music that artists actually want, and I'm not just creating music that's just going into an abyss. Have other producers who share that style of music, and then you two can even share artists who enjoy creating music to that style of music. On top of that, you still want to understand when it comes to mainstream or popular styles of beats or just styles of music production that you don't too much care to create, but you understand that there's a demand for. One thing I like to ask myself is, why do people like this style of music? What is it about this music that makes people gravitate towards it? Is it the energy? Is it the rawness? Is it the melody? Is it the mix? Is it the bass? So that way I can take bits and pieces of a popular genre or a genre that I just don't like to create too often and add it to my style. You know, pick off a couple pieces, add it to my style, so that way I can mix it all together in a gumbo and at least a little something unique that I can stretch my own boundaries and creativity, at least from time to time. Have the style of music that I really like making, but still understanding why people like other styles of music, and if it's necessary, eventually when I come to that point, I can create that style of beat, that style of music as well, in case there's other opportunities that might show up in the future.
Question from Zap: what lessons or concepts do you wish you had learned earlier in your music making journey? I apologize if you heard this story before, but back near when I first started making beats, I felt like there was always something wrong with whatever I made. I never knew why, so I started to do research online. I followed the common advice I saw everywhere online, and I still see this to this day, which is the problem that I was having was mixing and mastering. That if I learned how to mix and master, that my beats would suddenly sound good. So I thought, perfect, this must be the solution to my problem. So I signed up to a mixing and mastering class in my school, paying almost $800 for it. And after this 6-week course, I basically learned the exact same stuff you can learn on YouTube for free. EQing, compression, all the same old stuff I already knew that didn't help my beats at all. So I thought, well, they probably didn't teach me the right stuff. So what do I do next? I paid multiple engineers to help me directly. This cost me multiple thousands of dollars, but I thought being able to talk to these people directly and ask questions will help. So I did. I asked them, why do my beats sound so bad? Not only did they have no idea how to help me, they didn't even know what I was talking about. They couldn't hear the problem that I could. So it was a huge waste of time and money. After a few more years of experimenting, trying to figure out what mistake I was making, I finally realized what I was doing wrong. I was choosing the wrong snares. That's it. And none of the mixing engineers were able to help me because they didn't understand beat making. And this is the lesson that I wish I learned early on. It's like the third time I've mentioned this, but knowing the fundamentals, like how to add sounds into your beats correctly, it's so key. All the problems that you think you have, like mixing or arranging, are all downstream symptoms of this root cause.
Wow, that was an interesting story. You know, fortunately, I'm in Atlanta, and in Atlanta, the engineers do understand beat making. Some actually come from a beat making background, and then they eventually found themselves as recording engineers. So when I moved to Atlanta, you know, over a decade ago, I was fortunate enough to pay money to be with engineers, but they did actually know what I was talking about, and that helped me a lot. So, you know, Navie D, you know, I apologize. I wish you could have got some of these Atlanta engineers, because, man, they would have set you up real nice, man. So definitely happy about that. Shout out to all the engineers out here in Atlanta. Now, as far as the original question, what's one thing I wish I knew in the beginning of my music production journey? I would say that less is more. I'm making beats for recording artists, not to show off to other producers. And it's like I would find myself in different producer echo chambers. So I would hear a producer's beat that was just crazy. And I'm like, man, I really wish I knew how to, chop a sample like that. I really wish I knew how to make my kicks hit hard like that. So I was in competition with other producers, which is good to a certain extent because you always want to, sharpen your sword, make sure that you're competitive amongst your peers. But just doing that too much. Recording artists don't require all that. They want good sounding beats, but man, check this out. Artists also want a person with a cool vibe to be around, that they can even watch you make a beat. And even that's a whole new world. Are you a person who I want to be next to cook up a beat? I didn't realize how valuable that was until much later. Or are you a good communicator? Are you a structured person? Do you know how to return text messages and emails? These are all different skills that I wasn't quite aware of how valuable it was until much later. I thought I had to have the most insane, earth-shaking 808s and switch ups and crazy effects and things like that, but that's not the case. Less is more. Also, there are skills that are much more valuable than the actual beat making, beat creating process that artists really, really value. I wish I knew that in the beginning and learned it later, but I wish I knew it earlier. It would have saved me a lot of time.
And finally, last question is by Terrell. I've been making beats for years now. I definitely have gotten better over time, but I think my biggest problem has been consistency. Some days I can knock out 4 to 5 beats in a session, while other days my ears are just not in the mood to listen through samples and sounds. And some days I dread even opening my DAW. This is something that a lot of producers struggle with, and I'm thankful that I came across this one particular book in my early 20s because I think it directly helped me solve this problem and get to where I am today. And that book is Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. No, I'm just kidding. It's called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Right next to me is a short podcast where the author of this book explains the ideas in it. And I think this will help you never get beat block again if you watch it.
Yes, this can be a problem, and a lot of producers go through this, especially as we become a bit more comfortable with the beat making process. Somebody hits us up or somebody comes over, we know that we can cook up at least a solid beat. We can make something solid. If you come over, you need a beat, I can make something solid. And once you get to that point, it is easy to get in a comfort zone and then find yourself uninspired at times. So I would say this, at least block out some time to do something. Sometimes it's just a drum pattern. Sometimes it's finding a sample and chopping it and telling yourself explicitly, I'm not gonna make a beat today. I got 30 minutes. I'm not gonna make a beat today. I'm just gonna go through, I'm gonna find 3 samples, I'm gonna chop them up, I'm gonna save them, and then I'm gonna come back to them later. Or I'm just gonna make some hard drum patterns. I'm not gonna add any melodies. I'm just gonna save them, put in a folder, and then come back to them later. This is something that happens to me a lot. I'll say that, but there'll be a magical moment that just hits me. And I'm like, I told myself I wasn't gonna make a beat, but ooh, I just felt that. I gotta finish it. I gotta finish that idea. So sometimes you do got to play some tricks on yourself to kind of feel like you're doing something different, or you're shaking your comfort zone, and that can help inspire you and push you to actually make a beat when you really don't feel like it. Also, reaching out to another producer where you do share that similar style, where you two can work with each other, send each other, different stems, different FLPs, and you guys can finish each other's ideas. There's nothing like hitting that play button in your DAW after you put all the stems in there, that you hear what somebody else made, they want you to finish it. It's just magic, man. It's like you hit the button, you hit your space bar, and it's like, ooh, I'm gonna switch that. I'm gonna add this piano. I'm gonna take that bass out. I'm gonna do an 808. There's nothing like that. So, don't be afraid to reach out on Instagram, to reach out on BeatStars, and just find, even if it's 1 or 2 other producers that you can bounce ideas off of. That way that can help you have nonstop inspiration and also an accountability partner. That was a really fun video to make. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit like and subscribe. My name is Desmond A, and I'll be back with more great videos. Peace.
Desmond A.